anyone here from the public that would like to provide? No? Okay. Next up then is the minutes, and we have a few additions to the minutes.
Oh, yes, so, sorry, I have to look at my phone, where I took a picture of my very dirty notes.
So do you have paper copies of the minutes in front of you?
I do.
Because maybe you can just fill out the,
Oh, you know what, I don't have a paper copy of the minutes, but
that can be fixed.
fill it out.
So at the end of the minutes, you'll notice the highlighted part, and so Jenna took those notes and she's just adding them now so that we can finish the gaps and fill the gaps. Any other corrections to the minutes while she's doing that? So I guess we could take a motion to approve the minutes, as once she's adding the motions and the times.
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes with the addition of the times and names.
All right, thank you, Allison.
Second.
Thanks, Brenda. Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right. I'm sure she wanted to say yes.
Yes.
Thank you, and then just hand it right over to Steph and Rebecca. All right, next up is the treasurer's report and the check register. And so I have a question right off the bat, which is, what's the difference between pages 6 and 7 of the packet? There are two treasurer's reports underneath. Do we need to see those, Chuck?
I don't know what you mean, but between pages 6 and 7.
Here I mean.
Oh,
Can you pass this down to Chuck? So while he's looking that over, they're different,
they must be, okay, it's possible they were duplicate.
but they're different. So while he's looking that over, just note that this is the end of year, so now we know all of 2018. And so we learned a few things about our spending for the whole year, including how much, how we fared on the budget.
Here, this one.
Is it just the fees?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
all
it's
different.
a month,
This
oh,
one, I believe.
yeah, okay. Something you
No,
can
no,
do.
there's two copies, there's this one and there's this one.
So there,
And these are both different.
so Allison and Scott are both saying that there's just, the difference is just the fees.
There's a 20% difference between the two different
Oh, and
reports.
that's not a difference,
501.
net income in current month is different?
It could be related to the fees, because that subtracts from the income. So I just, do we know which one is correct? The one with the fees
It
corrected?
should be the 476, not the
Current
501.
month with the net
Okay?
Can you pass that back?
Yeah,
Thank you.
it is.
So which, does anyone know which page that is? Page 6?
7.
Page 7
is
is
correct.
okay.
I don't have the Boyd track, so I can't tell you.
That's okay. Thank you for
No problem.
clarifying that. Okay, and then I did not check to see which the detailed expenses are matched. So that looks like that's just the expenses, okay. And it was only the income that was different? Thanks for looking at this. All right, with that, any questions about the end of year? Any observations anyone wants to share?
insurance, we spent $4, is that correct?
That's all we got for the whole year.
Okay.
Except that we spent, it looks weird, I understand. It's the
Figure
way
that
it
out.
fell.
And I just want to make a note that the way that we usually have the fund balance has changed. So the fund balance usually shows up at the bottom of of expenditure and moved up to income.
Which report are you looking at?
Page 7. Normally, in the past, when we've looked at budgets, the fund balance used shows up toward the bottom of the page. Does that ring a bell? You usually see it down there. And then,
That's no problem, I can move that with ease.
no, it's fine. It may make more sense to put it there. I just want, that's not where we're used to seeing it, so I just wanted to point out that that looks a little different.
Okay.
And that affects the net income and loss. So it doesn't affect the bottom line necessarily, but it looked different to me and I had a response to that. Oh, hi Arlene, welcome.
Yep.
We need you to sit in the audience today.
Sorry.
Thanks. All right, so the other thing I want to notice is that we outperformed the budget by $971,000. We had planned to use $329,000 of the fund balance, but we actually didn't use any fund balance and had a $682,000 profit, essentially. Most of that was the pilot payments that were unexpected, larger than expected. But I just wanted to note that that's a consistent pattern since I've been on the board, that we are outperforming our budget by quite a bit.
Which sounds like it would be good business practice.
Excuse me?
Which sounds like it would be good business practice.
Well, it is what it is. That's what the numbers say, and I think why I bring it up is because this has affected the way that we budget for the next year, and that's what we're doing next. And I want people to remember that when we're budgeting. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you. Next up is the check register, the new one that has been on the table. I'll take a motion to approve the check register. Allison, thank you, and second. Alyssa, thank you, and then questions. Any questions about any of the checks? Yes, Sarah.
9562, Johnson Controls, maintenance service contracts.
That's the contracts that we have for all of our HVAC systems. If we have them on a maintenance contract, it actually saves us money, especially with some of the issues that we've been having over the last 2 years. Today is an example. The overhead yesterday, power went out. We don't know what caused something to explode. Power went out partially in this building. Everything had to be shut down. I don't know if it's working right now, but there's one unit up top on the first level, the roof that needed to be looked at by Johnson Controls. So it puts them on call, and it also is cheaper when they respond. We only have to pay, I think, for replacement parts.
And that's an annual
Yep.
thing. Any other questions? Yeah, Brenda?
Scott, what's 9445 doing?
9445. Oh, Albany Barn, programming, so we're probably doing a long-standing program with them, where they're doing multiple sessions. So we pay them to come in and do a program for us.
There's no more questions. I'll ask all in favor. Aye. Brenda, are you? Okay, great. Thanks. Next up. So many papers. Can't find them. Next up, the nomination committee has made a recommendation to fill the vacancy left by Michael Nepple. And there is a resolution in the packet on page 9. The nomination committee recommended Arlene Way to fill the vacancy. Arlene has joined us today. She's in the front with a fabulous hat. So the resolution is a recommendation from the nomination committee. And so we need a second for it. Be considered.
Brenda.
Brenda, great, thank you. Pardon?
But it can't be someone on the committee for this.
Right, right. So then, any discussion? Yeah?
I actually noticed, since this is actually a makeup meeting, if we can just change the date in the resolution, it says, February 12th instead of 26th.
Okay. Thank you. And I guess the first motion is made by committee recommendation, or committee, and seconded by Brenda. All right, all in favor? Great, unanimous, thank you. We're very excited to have you. And we'll do your oath at the end of the meeting. All right, so new business, Allison, the Vice President for Finance, needs to leave early tonight, so I asked to move up the budget earlier in the meeting. So take it away, Scott, Allison.
Sure, okay, so the Finance Committee met on February 11th to look at the 2020 budget that we're proposing. And we are asking for a 0%, no increase. We really would like this year to be the year that we change the fiscal year. So we would have a January to June short year and then start a fiscal year from July to the following June. That's one of the big reasons, besides the fact that we've projected incorrectly in years past, but one of the really big reasons that we want to go out for a 0% ask. We looked at the 2019 budget, and I'd like to say that Scott and Adam did a great job with the 2020 budget. And I know that some of the lines from the 2019 budget are gonna look off because we didn't have some of the things like the pilot payments in there. And that's something that we want to look at, and we have on the schedule to look at to amend the 2019 budget to reflect those sources of income and any other modifications that need to be made, but we want to do that in April. But tonight we're really going to look at just the 2020 column. Adam, do you want to speak about any of the, or Scott, the particulars?
Sure, I can go over some of the bottom line differences here. Support revenue was increased by 3.6%. That's mainly due to the pilot payment associated with whether that the fine-free initiative is going to cause a decrease in fine revenue. Payroll-related costs, that's increased by 4.5%, mainly due to raises, slightly more staff being hired, new positions, and projected increase in insurance costs. Occupancy was increased by 26,000. One of that is a van, as well as furniture replacement and building repairs. The buildings are 10 years old at that point, so. Materials increased by 4.4%, just to account for demand and increased digital offerings. The administrative line has actually decreased by just over 4%. We found some redundancies and we're able to cut out a little there. And IT has increased by 11.3%. That's based on the IT plan that Melanie has developed.
One of the questions that did come up was the branch improvement plan. The numbers seem to change year to year, and that Adam did a good job explaining to us that it's actually a predetermined schedule. It's kind of like, you know, a payment book that they tell you this year you're going to pay this much, and that's why that number changes a little bit each year.
It's not one large bond, it's multiple bonds, or it's multiple purchase pieces, so one year they change to the next. So that creates a little bit of a fluctuation in what we pay out to those bonds.
And you don't know it when we budget, we know it when we pay it.
Well, no, we know it when we budget, we have a schedule.
Yeah, I actually have a copy of the schedule right here, if you'd like to take a look
Right,
at it.
but the, when it was paid last year, it was a little bit.
Yeah, that was, there were a couple of issues there. But the key issue is, last year, we were credited about $11,000 in interest. So the amount that was on the payment schedule was actually not what we paid. We were credited $11,000.
So the payment schedule was correct, the budget was correct, it's just that there was a credit that was,
It turns out there was also an error on what was part of the 2018 approved budget. It was slightly off from the schedule, probably just an error. So that was a little off. There was also an error on Dazzley's end, where we paid them $15,000 in 2017. That was then, I think, mistakenly applied to 2018 amount on the budget modification. I can say with confidence though that the amounts here on the 2019 and 2020 budget are correct. And while they may not be equal to the actual amount we end up paying due to these potential interest credits that we could get, right now these are the correct figures.
thank you.
Sure.
And I'll just say that we're doing this, so we have time to talk it over, we're not gonna vote on the budget tonight, we vote on it in March. We had a lot of discussion on the budget last time. And this is actually supposed to be the budget discussion meeting, the cancellation 2 weeks ago. Change that. Any other things that the questions, concerns? Sarah, as a member of the finance committee, is there anything you'd like to add?
I think that's a cover it all. Did you mention the fund balance designations?
No, that was for the meeting.
Oh, that's right, we're only doing budget, we're not doing.
Yeah.
Never mind.
So just, could somebody talk through the decrease in fees? So what is the 80,000 represent if it's not, late fees?
That is replacements of items that are not returned. That is computer passes, the dollar computer passes. And that's right tied into this, that's that's CDTA bus passes.
Wait, fees and sales, the bus passes are in there?
The CDTA commission that we get is factored into that 2020 figure. We've also incorporated other, we intend to eliminate this miscellaneous line going forward. That included things like book sales, Better World Book, income. We're going to factor that into fees and sales going.
So could you break down that 80,000 in terms of, I'm a little, fees that we charge for library things do not seem similar to a commission we get to sell somebody else's thing. So I'm curious why we would, because that seems like earned, just from a, if you were to use this revenue and separate earned income and municipal income, or, yeah.
Well, I mean, the fees for replacement of books, that could, and then the computer passes, that could all also be considered earned income. And printing, that, I mean, that's also income. So I don't.
Yeah, I guess I would wanna know what of the 80,000 is the CDTA passes.
I can tell you in 2018, the CDTA commission total was between $7,000 and $8,000, so it ultimately is a pretty small piece of that 80,000. Most of that is going to consist of the library fees that we charge.
So,
I see what you're saying, it's not our thing.
yeah, it's not our thing. And we agreed to do that for CDTA because we were making commission on it. Do we ever look at what staff time and cost is for, so how does that relate?
I mean, I don't know if that has been considered, the amount of time staff has to invest in handling these navigator sales. Something that might be worth looking into, discussing.
I mean, even if it's an estimate, we do a quick survey.
Maybe we
of-
can do that.
Because when we look at our expenditures and we're paying out in a month $45,000 to CDTA for navigator passes, it's a big transaction. The money amount is a big transaction, so that makes me think that it's a lot of it is being sold, which means that our staff is selling a lot of it for $7,000 a year. I don't know. Big question, right? So, and so, in terms of it in that line, is it possible? You know, we have rent income here, which clearly, you know, we've made an investment in renting, that seems to be a clear thing. If we potentially could offer this service to other community businesses that sell things, I don't know, the post office or passports, you know,
Stamps.
right.
No, I'm just.
No, that's what I'm saying. So could we have a different line than sticking it in fees?
Also, the CDTA could decide to stop working with us in any moment, which is I think where it really differs.
Yeah, we could definitely break it down to sublines. I mean, I don't wanna speak for Chuck and Adam, but
No, it's no problem, it's already booked separately on the back end, so giving it its own line here would, you know, I see no reason not to do that.
And I guess, to this point, Alyssa, something else that we had talked about was also book sales going to this line. You said also a small number, like 5,000.
Yeah, Better World Books and just a couple of small sales we do every year.
So what line would that go into? Because it's not a fee, it would be a sale similar to.
I guess that was the logic behind calling this line fees and sales and with commissions too, that stems from a variety of sales that we do. So, again, it could be given its own line.
Maybe it would be helpful, I'm sorry, maybe it would be helpful if we could see a breakdown of everything that's in fees and sales, and then we can try to, you know, parse out.
Okay, I would feel more comfortable if it was fees and sales that are related to library services and items. You know, if we're using taxpayer money to buy books and then when we take them off the shelves and we sell them, that's still kind of an internal products and services. Whereas if we're selling somebody else's stuff, it's a different kind of sale.
Although that could oftentimes there are donations that are made to books, because I know that.
Not at,
Not at APL?
is it?
Yeah, which, so that, I mean, not to,
Better World books are a combination of both weeded material and donated material.
which adds complication. I mean, I guess the donators are taxpayers.
Well, and we're getting a little bit detailed here, and so what I'm wondering is, why is this important to know?
Well, first of all, the CDTA fees are directly connected to staff time that we have, we're still looking at whether it's a partnership. And I would think that we should look at that.
Okay, so that's the CDTA part, but there's this broader conversation about breaking down that section. How is that, I just wanna know how it's gonna help. Because we're asking staff to do more.
If I could throw something in here, in relationship to what she's speaking, I think that would be a good idea if we did do some kind of survey to find out how much time is being spent selling these tickets. Because not only is the fact that our personnel are spending more time doing an outside project, it would also give us some measurement to arbitrate with CTA to have the commission increase because of our time being spent selling these tickets.
So could we just have a line that might say like partnerships, and that would cover anybody we?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly add a line here and then call it.
Something along those lines.
Sure.
That just breaks up, and it wouldn't have to just be CDTA if we had other partnerships we worked with. That would break it out.
Is it doesn't matter. You guys can call it whatever
It doesn't have to be that.
you want. Does that make sense to you?
It's really up to Chuck and Adam.
Does it make sense to you guys? It's owners.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly doable. I have no objections.
Yeah, I have no problems adding a line in there to make it completely separate.
Okay. All right, anything else that you're noticing? Anything else you want to dig into before we? Ah!
Whoa.
Is that before we dance in the dark?
Yeah, this might be a power outage.
There's
No.
the signs are still on, so there's not a
Yeah,
power.
like the alarms would go off if small alarm would go off.
Okay, so other grants, construction grant, you're proposing 20,000, what is that?
Did we get the upwards and library, what's the upwards and library?
I don't think we got it for 2020.
No, that's, we always put an estimated number that we could receive from the construction grants, but we've become much more careful
Oh, I see.
compared to the way they've awarded before in the past.
And is that foundation contribution zero?
Yes, because the foundation has moved to a grant model for the last year. So what they do now is staff apply for a grant for funding of their programming, as opposed to money just kind of put in the library's pockets.
So where is that reflected in budget?
So that's a pass-through. Chuck, do you want to kind of explain how we handle pass-throughs?
I don't know if I can even do it justice. Basically, is that the outside entity bills us, and then we in turn build the outside part. If I can explain that right. And then I basically just exchange each other. Okay? So it really, the bottom line doesn't measure up to being much dollars. Did I explain that right?
Well, if the library is still paying for the program, which should be reflected in program costs here, right?
So, I mean, that is a way we can handle it,
Yes.
without a doubt. This is the way we've always handled it, so this is kind of the pass-through has always been the way that additional funding like this has been handled, not my favorite way of doing it.
Wait. Pass-through is not a great term
No.
for this, and so we go out with this budget and it looks like the foundation is contributing 0. And all these people came to the foundation gala and contributed money and bought things. I think that's a bad precedent. And to say that it's a pass-through, if we're spending more on programming, it should be reflected in our program costs. Where are our programming activities?
Programming is actually, we're moving it for the 2021 budget. It's actually the second to last line in administrative and miscellaneous. So we do plan to move that because I don't think that's the
Right.
right place to put it. It
Okay,
should be
so
in the
those
material
two
needs
costs, if you are paying for programming, we're providing programming, that should be reflected in those programming costs. Regardless of, so are you saying that we have programming that goes on, we pay for more programming, that it's reflected in these programming costs? Why would we do that?
So just to clarify, so there's the programming costs related to the foundation competitive process are not in the 2018?
They're not, no.
But they're paying for the,
They pay for the program.
they're paying.
Yes.
They're not paying the library for those costs. They're paying the presenter directly.
Are they, is that how we've been handling it, or has it been a check that comes to us?
I would probably think that they are paying those costs on their own books. And then whatever is in a net amount, they would pay us.
Okay, so at some point, there's an agreement between the library and the foundation that the foundation is going to support this set of programming at this cost, right? Okay, and then they take that on and they do the scheduling and the paying of that program?
No, they typically pay for the costs of the programming, staff still do the scheduling.
Okay.
I will say there are instances of the foundation authorizing transfers to our bank accounts, and then we cut the checks to the.
Okay, that absolutely should be reflected in income and expenses. If there's money coming in, we need to see it here. If they are agreeing to do a set of programming, then there should be a memorandum of understanding between the foundation and the library that this is the relationship. Because right now, that number is a false representation of how much programming we actually do and how much income we bring to this endeavor of the library.
No, I completely agree with you, Alyssa. I was under the idea that it was almost more like an in-kind contribution. I thought they were paying. I didn't realize there was a bill on our end and then a reimbursement, which absolutely sounds like a grant. And then I would wonder if instead of foundation contribution, it should be listed as another grant line.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are, now to make this more complicated, there are other things the foundation does that benefit the library where the money doesn't necessarily change hands. So that wouldn't show up here at all because no money is changing. And the money isn't coming from the foundation to the library to do something. The art program, for example.
The
So
what
there's
program?
the art program.
Right,
So that's another, that's,
that should be reflected in the memorandum of understanding.
there's no, I guess my point is that that line is zero, in addition to the issue we just discussed, doesn't fully reflect the benefit that the foundation.
That's why my recommendation is two. One is that this reflects any money that comes into the library, regardless of where it comes from. And if it's paid out in program, it should be reflected there. So if there is a transfer, that should be reflected here. And then two is anything else that the foundation does to support our larger library agenda here should be agreed upon in a yearly MOU that says this is what we'll do in support of our library program. Because right now, how are we justifying to people who make contributions to the library foundation that anything is happening? Right here, we're just showing them. Library foundation, big zero.
Well, there's a little bit of our responsibility as a trustee of the library, but there's also the foundation's responsibility to tell the story about what's happening, and they are doing that in lots of different ways. So, I'm not saying MOU isn't a good idea. I think we've talked about that at the foundation board. But some of it's our story to tell, and some of it's their story to tell.
So then I would take this off. Take it off the income list. Why show a zero income?
Well, I actually agree with you about the grant thing. So if we're getting grants and it's being used in through our systems, then that should show up.
Do we do that with any other organization? Does any other organization just kind of pay us money and we do a program for them?
You mean how like we outsource our programming?
You just use the phrase pass.
So, yeah, so there are times where we receive money from outside organizations to do programming in-house. Trying to think of the most recent, what might be a most recent example. Sometimes just an organization likes what we're doing and says, I want to give X amount of money to make sure this program keeps going.
So where is that reflected?
Again, it's always been reflected as income. Sometimes it's been recorded in different places. So I'm in agreement with you. I think we need to record that better going forward. So we may need to create just a separate grants line or a programming grants line, and that's where we start recording that money. I'm in agreement. I think everybody's in agreement with you.
Mhm.
That's the right way to do it.
The only point I was making is that this isn't the only way we tell stories about how the foundation supports the library, and it's not just our job, it's also the foundation's job to do that.
Yeah, I think we're not helping anything by showing the zero.
Yeah, I agree, and I think, yeah, but,
This might have been covered in committee, I just don't remember. I know typically when we have a zero, like, getting rid of the miscellaneous line, so showing the 10,000 and 19 and the 0 and 20, but I do see the foundation at 0 in both years. Was it just for comparison purposes to see compared to 19, or was it actually going to go in our 2020 budget?
My recollection is that
I think we kept it in the 19 budget because we weren't sure if the grant program was going to be the appropriate way or the way that the foundation board had agreed to move forward. So in reality, probably the best thing, what we should have done is just gotten rid of it this year.
And then like that 0 for miscellaneous, will that line actually appear on the 2020 budget, or is that just for our comparison?
It's just comparison.
Okay. So just coming back to the foundation, we're not going to put a 0 line on a budget that
No.
anyone.
so what will happen though is it'll be estimated what the grants will be.
Well, I mean, that's whatever the suggestion of the board and the finance committee would be, but I think we're comfortable with either whatever the direction that the committee wants to take with it. So if we wanna create a line and do an estimate of what may come in based on, we can look at what the foundation gave us last year for donations for the grant process and say, okay, we'll base it on that line. We can talk to the foundation board and say, did you make more money last year? Will there be more money coming from the APL? And then base it from there. I think that's a good idea.
I think it has to be a conversation with the foundation.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I believe that's how we ended up at zero to begin with.
Yeah.
That it wasn't a study income line, and so we didn't want to count on it. And that's when the grant program started, where they started paying for programming, more than just giving us a lump of sum of money.
The foundation's board concern, and this is the reason why we changed it, and I agreed with this, is the fact that in the past, the foundation just gave $20,000 to the library. And that meant people were giving money to a library that also was collecting a significant amount of money in taxes. And we felt it was better for the foundation to actually say in their annual appeal letters, this is where your money went. And that's, I've reported in my past board reports. I've always noted when there's a program that's sponsored by the foundation, and that's with the idea of correctly communicating to funders where their money's going. I think my last board report, it was the mask making program that was at Arbor Hill. I know Teen Chef here. Those are all programs that have been funded by the foundation, and that was the reasoning behind it, was just to be able to say in their appeal letter, you gave money to the appeal last year and here's all the great programs that it funded, as opposed to just kind of being put into the library's budget, especially when the library was in the black. I think it made it for a difficult narrative when raising funds for the foundation.
And also, if you haven't checked out the foundation's Person Behind series, it tells stories about the people who come up with the grant ideas and about the programs. And it's really a very nice series, helping the foundation tell the story, but you're welcome to share that.
So in all those programs, is the foundation paying those artists, or are we paying the artists to do those programs?
They're paying. So whatever the cost of the program is, so say,
They paid the artist directly?
yes. Well, no, they don't. We
Well,
pay the artist, and then
Bingo!
so they pay the artist and then we get the check from the foundation. So then it should be
reimburse.
recorded or reimbursed.
Yeah,
So it should
That-
be recorded.
No.
thank you for raising that, Melissa.
Now, there are other models that pay those checks directly. And that is the Schenectady model, you can check with them. It's the Minneapolis, the St. Paul one does it that way, where they just control the programming that they do, they pay all of that, they do all of that, they don't give it all benefits the library, but it's a separate, paid for separately. So, either model is fine, just we have to be consistent with it.
Any other questions or concerns about the budget? Hi, Andy.
Hi, sorry I was late, I apologize, my apologies.
Did you find, we're on page 10, looking at the 2020 budget, so, do you have any questions or comments? Just think about next month's vote. Well, do it for Andy. So,
Please move the agenda.
so we'll talk about the capital budget later in the meeting, and that's not gonna influence what's going on here, okay? Alright. I'm gonna move on. Okay. Thank you all. Thanks, Allison. Alright, so next on the agenda, I had sent around an email about the annual retreat. This is something Scott and I have been talking about for a while. We talked about it at the last meeting a little bit, and there's some notes about it in the executive committee report. And we talked about hiring Nancy Preston and Diane Cameron, who have come tonight to talk about what they are thinking about the retreat. So I guess a little more background on that is the executive committee minutes, or the executive committee met in January to talk about the retreat. And the consensus was the purpose should be more social and team building, and do a little bit of deep dive work, and also Nancy helped us with the strategic plan, and there's a little bit of work to do on the strategic plan, so trying to figure out how to incorporate that into the retreat and or meetings in advance to make the retreat more meeting the needs of the executive committee identified. So with that little bit of introduction, I would love if you guys talked a little bit about what you're thinking about the retreat, and then give the trustees opportunities to ask questions.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Nancy, for those of you who don't know me, this is Diane. We first really appreciate the fact that you all took the time to provide Karen with some input about the way that you want, what your expectations are for the retreat, because we really do want to understand the shared expectations from you for the day. As Karen said, I'm going to be attending the board meetings leading up to the retreat. Diane, Karen, and I had a phone call about a couple weeks ago talking about some of the work that we might want to think about doing between now and June, doing a survey of sorts to start gathering information. I have some notes, I'm just going to look at those occasionally. Sorry that I'm not maintaining eye contact here. Thinking about things like the board's purpose, shared responsibilities, understanding of roles and expectations of being on the board, recognizing, of course, that a library board is a little different in that you are elected as opposed to volunteering, being offered the opportunity to serve on a board. To reflect on accountability and think about what your stories are, why you chose to run for the board. What does service mean to you in terms of being on a board? We say often that people choose to, you serve on a board, you don't sit on a board, so there are expectations. So to really get a sense of that, and so to gather your input anonymously, have us take a look at the input that we get from you, and then craft an agenda, as Karen said, that does two things. One, that has that element of social and the opportunity for reflection and some more, less of a deep dive, but then to also think about that within the context of what is expected of you as a board trustee for the library. So.
And as Nancy said, she'll be attending the next couple of meetings and sort of continuing the strategic plan work that we did and building toward the June retreat, where we'll have time to engage more, tell stories, participate with each other, knit together.
So we would love, to continue to gather your information. Karen did share the input that you provided to her as a result. Is it the executive?
It was just the executive committee, yes.
We really believe that the more people that participate in defining the agenda, the more ownership there is ultimately of it, rather than just Diane and me crafting an agenda that doesn't necessarily meet your needs or serve your interests. So I do want to encourage you again, I've got these meetings on my calendar, March, April, May, and to really encourage you to give some thought to what you might want from that June agenda.
So there's probably a survey forthcoming.
Yeah.
And we may do some activities during those meetings.
Yep, we'll see. Yep.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
Have we confirmed the date?
No, we haven't confirmed the date. So it seemed that most people could make both except Sarah. Can't make either one.
I can do my best. June is
Okay.
just a tough time.
Yeah, right. So, we'll do that before the next meeting.
Yeah, I think we both have holds on the 1st and the 8th.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And that was, we had talked about earlier, but we moved it on any suggestion that we have it when, after the new trustees are elected. And then, as a trustee who's cycling off, he wanted to also participate, so the timing was good for that. Any other questions about, how does that sound to you?
We have some great facilitators here and authors and, all the other good stuff, so time spent with them would be advantageous.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, committee and liaison reports. You can start with the executive committee, which is on page 11, and we talked about quite a bit of it already. We reviewed the board expectation guideline that came back to the executive committee after a meeting last fall. And the executive committee agreed it should be just an expectation document that's a guideline, not a official policy with an enforcement mechanism. There's some questions about the board member absence policy, and now that the Policy and Governance Committee is taking up the bylaws, perhaps there's some opportunity to clarify some of that language. And Brenda suggested we note whether absences are excused or unexcused. The other board she's on do that, which helps track over time, whether people gave appropriate notice for the absence. Recognizing the absences happen, it's okay. We talked about how frequently the executive committee meets, and APL administration recommended once a year to assign committee membership, and that will happen in July, and I don't recall if we set the date. And I suppose then as needed otherwise. And then we talked a little bit more about the retreat agenda, and you can read through those questions, those notes. Any other comments from the executive committee or questions from the rest of the trustee? All right, thank you. And so you don't have to listen to me give the second report. Janet, would you be willing to give the nomination committee report? It's on page 12.
Page 13 for some reason. Nomination committee met, and we discussed a lot the process for nominating a potential trustee, given the timing as an election is coming up fairly soon, and we discussed a lot about the nomination committee outreach process and things that we could discuss for recruiting potential future trustees, and we decided that it would make the most sense after discussion with Alyssa, who wasn't able to be present but gave her position in advance, that it made the most sense to nominate an esteemed former trustee so that we weren't creating a sort of incumbency that wouldn't have actually existed for the re-election. So we decided to nominate Arlene Way, and she agreed, and that's great. And then we discussed a little bit about how to sort of, in our recruitment for future trustees, make sure that the board best reflects the city, and ways that we can do that, ways that we can try to kind of spread our reach. We also had to talk a little bit about what the timeline had to be for the election and community forums. And that we plan to meet again to kind of review what our material will be for outreach and discuss it. Any questions? Yes.
Were there any ideas discussed as far as reaching more of the community, or just a general discussion on how to?
It was a while ago.
It was more of a general discussion, and we're meeting next Tuesday to get more detail, and I think there's actually a schedule, but I don't remember what it is at this point. The March meeting, we'll finalize that schedule, and that would include, when our meetings are for outreach, what the official schedule is for petitioning, and the community forums that the library puts on as well. So we'll have all that set by next meeting. But if you're interested in helping us have that conversation, you're welcome to join us out next Tuesday at 6. So I don't know, I don't remember the schedule, but so we'll that.
We reviewed what the previous schedule was and talked a little bit about how successful that had been. That was what we accepted.
If you have other ideas, please share. Any other questions? Great. Next up is Finance Committee. So Allison left, so who wants to do it?
So, Allison already covered some of this when we looked at the 2020 proposed budget. That was what I'd say we spent the majority of our meeting on. As she said, we're already aware of amendments that need to be made in the 2019 budget, and that's something that we'll look at coming up. The other things that we discussed aside from the 19 and 20 budgets were the fund balance and designating it into 3 different reserve funds. As you can see in the minutes, the numbers are broken out for you, but one reserve being the capital fund, which we've been working on establishing with the facilities committee, doing a walkthrough of all the branches and charting out what repairs will be coming up in the next 5 years. So that's what our capital fund is for, so it wouldn't pull out of the operating fund. We also have a reserve assigned specifically for the operational budget, and then we have a small portion unassigned. So those were the 3 reserves that we discussed and approved in committee for the fund balance. We also discussed further our fiscal year change. It's still being researched by staff at this point, and the way we're looking at doing it would be a short January to June 2020 year, and then the July 2020 to June 2021 budget being a full year that would sync up with the school budget, and we would be on the proper school library year at that point. So that's still in the research phase. Are there any questions?
So if you're making recommendation on the designation of the fund balance, does that come to the board during our budget discussion?
Would it be discussed in
I
committee?
think you moved, so it could be seconded here in this portion.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing I know I saw the Finance Committee meeting minutes at some point over the past several weeks. Thank you. There it is, okay. Thanks. Okay.
And our motion's actually on the next page, top of the second.
Okay. And because we switched the meeting around, we didn't put that in, so shall we just deal with it now?
So what was the thinking between do you need a second motion to discuss?
Yes, does someone want to second the motion from the Finance Committee to how to designate the
I'll second it.
fund balance? Thanks, Elisa.
Okay, so what was the thinking of the separating out pretty much equally there, the operational budget and the unassigned?
I believe these were the the numbers that came to us from the staff recommendation, so I don't know if Adam or Scott, you wanna speak to that?
So this is following the policy that was passed by the board in 2013 and then revised in 2017. The estimated amount of the fund balance is 4.9 million. So our suggestion to the committee was 3 million for the capital fund, which is an unassigned unrestricted according to the policy. 957,751 is a number derived from the next 3 years of projected fund balance use in the operational budget. This is based on the 5-year financial plan that was adopted by the board in 2018. And then the unassigned unrestricted, which is 947,703, were adjusted after the audit. This is money set aside if the library is to operate any deficit in a future fiscal year, kind of an emergency fund. Really, the 3 million is just, a capital fund. The assigned unrestricted, the almost 1 million, is really just looking at the next 3 years of possible fund balance use for operation. And then the unassigned is really the extra money that was left over after these two balances, just in case, say, stock market crashes and we have to pay much more into their state retirement fund than expected, or if all of our reimbursable medical is used, or if several people are out sick and they use their full sick time. Just kind of the staffing line is really the line that is most susceptible to outside, things that we don't predict correctly.
So what policy are you referring to?
So this is the fund balance policy.
We approved that in 2017?
You approved it in 2013 and then it was revised in March of 2017.
So how is this going to be reported? Is this going to be added to the monthly financial reports?
Yes. So what happens next is we go to the facilities committee, say according to the 5-year plan, these are the projects that we would like to do. The facilities committee agrees to it. The facilities committee brings it to the full board. The full board reports it. And then after that, it's reported out as a separate capital fund line. This is how most libraries do it. This is the direction that Adam and I are comfortable with doing it. It's really best practice across the state. It's really, in my opinion, the correct way to handle capital reserve funds and report capital reserve funds out.
Any other questions or concerns before we vote? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Anything else? And that's it for finance, right?
That's it for finance.
Thank you very much. Policy and governance,
Okay, we met on the 15th, and I sent the updated report, this is the 15th one that we have. We met on the 15th, we only have one order of new business. Scott had proposed a policy grid change, meeting quarterly and annual reviews of all policies. We agreed to keep the review intervals as they presently exist, not increasing to annual. Trustees will be familiar with policies and can read policies as needed, but we are going to keep them as is. Trustees agreed to meet every other month rather than quarterly. When we looked at the quarterly model, it created such a heavy load of policies to be reviewed, so we agreed on every other month for our meeting and for the reviews, and Scott was to update the policy committee quarterly. We had 4 policies reviewed. We had the blood-borne pathogens. We had no suggested changes to that. We made changes at the previous review, so we had the motion to accept that policy as is without any changes. We also reviewed the whistleblower policy. There were no proposed changes to this policy. We did question in regards to the attached certification page that came along
with the policy of the whistleblower because we hadn't done that in the past. And Scott was gonna follow up with legal in regards to that. But besides all that, we still put the motion to accept this policy as is. We had no changes. Very well done. We reviewed the conflict of interest. There were some changes from staff that we received, and we reviewed that, and we decided to make a motion to accept the policy without those amendments and keep the policy as is. And the last policy we reviewed was the materials selection. And the only issue that we saw, Sarah suggested adding "we" in parentheses in consideration in that particular policy, because it could be a suggestion on material request that would not be a second request, but perhaps a first, so it would be consideration, not reconsideration. So, made a motion to accept that policy with changes to reconsideration to add the RE in parentheses and then the consideration.
You may want to add that to the last page as well, page 25, because it's called reconsideration on the last page.
Well, I put an RE in parentheses as some request, blah, 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 and throughout the whole, except the changes throughout the whole policy. That's what I have on there. So that was our four.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I was just letting you know, because page 25, please share your reasons for requesting reconsideration of this item. It may just have gotten looked over.
Sarah's motion was to accept the policy with changes to reconsideration and reconsideration throughout the entire policy.
It's just missing the plans on that last page.
Gotcha. Thank you. So that was the four policies. Our next order of business that we had was bylaws. We're starting to review the bylaws. Hopefully everyone has them in their packets. We will give an update at the next board meeting to let you know where we are with that process. And hopefully it goes smooth, but please, you have the policy, start the bylaws, start looking for them yourself, so you can be familiar as well. But our committee is certainly reviewing those now. We give you an update as we move along. Another thing that came up during the meeting was the APL files, as we looked at that certification form, and we discussed some terminology and some of the policies that we have that states that the board or the board president would maintain certain policies. Scott mentioned that would designate a locked file cabinet with DOT files and other signed board documents, maintain them at the Washington Ave Branch Library for us, so we can be in compliance with whatever policy that said that we're going to maintain those. APL procedures, Scott made a great point. With our APL policies, they do have some procedures attached to them. And going forward, we will connect those together, so everyone will be aware how a particular policy may impact one of his procedures or processes, so we all can be on the same page. Our next meeting is March 13th, not the 1st. And that's it.
Just one reminder, we do need to change CFO to budget manager in the whistleblower and the conflict of interest.
CFO, the budget manager.
Alright, so,
So motions have been made on those four.
Yes.
right, the ones that aren't changed, we don't need to vote on, so now there's one. So, I need a second for the whistleblower policy changing, adding budget manager. We need a first and a second, because they didn't. Let's do a first and a second for that one. Adding budget manager to the whistleblower. What's that?
It's to the
No,
conflict
the-
of interest.
I'm sorry,
Sorry.
conflict of
Conflict
interest.
of interest. Isn't it, does it have to go to both? No.
There's no mention of that office in the whistleblower.
Okay, my apologies, we don't have to do that one then. Okay, so motion to add budget manager to the conflict of interest policy, Jenna, thank you. And second. Andy, thank you, all in favor? Aye, alright, passes. And then material selection, the edit to add reconsideration with parentheses, that was moved by committee. I'll take a second on that. Alyssa, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you. So also on the agenda is the personnel committee. Meeting was recently yesterday. We're just gonna defer that to the March meeting. And the very patient Scott will now give his first report.
So in March, the library will be working on its community report in several formats. That includes presentations. We will be providing to the board members next week a schedule for those presentations. We always ask for board members to be at as many neighborhood association meetings as possible. It's good to have members of the board there. Washington Avenue will be hosting a first Saturday for families, March into Spring on March 2nd. Bach will be celebrating Read Across America Day with an egg hunt at the library on March 2nd. Arbor Hill West Hill will be putting on a Dogman party on March 4th. I note that because that was an extremely popular program that we just did at the Delaware branch. Pine Hills will be hosting a talk by local author Akum Nodor entitled Skates, Soirees, and Matinees. Entertainment in Pine Hills on March 6th. In January, our Growing Readers Early Literacy program had 48 check-ins and 19 new registrants. Library operation was challenged by heavy snow, ice, and extreme cold. We have also seen an increase in vandalism, specifically Washington Avenue's bathrooms. Facilities estimates that we saw about $2,500 in repairs and staff hours to keep the bathrooms open at Washington Avenue. The Washington Avenue branch began a new program where a financial advisor provides free 30-minute financial planning and consultation sessions for patrons. Arbor Hill West Hill branches So You Want to Be a Library Clerk was a success. Not only did registration fill and we had all 12 people show up, we actually had some additional people, and we believe that we at least had one person who did the full application through civil service. That program will actually be replicated at Delaware if it hasn't already, and there's discussion about doing it at other branches as well. The Bach branch patrons were treated to 4 performances by Albany High School Jazz Band, and the Pine Hills branch's Kids Club is averaging 40 to 60 young participants and caregivers during after-school hours. The Delaware branch's Mystery Book Club had several new participants joining in a lively discussion about the anatomy of a scandal. And the Howell branch hosted this year's Leadership Tech Valley class for Diversity and Inclusion Day. This is a really great opportunity for the library to showcase to future leaders in the region. The library facilities, Rebecca Lubin was given a chance to talk about the impact that the library has on this community. Public Information is piloting a new comment suggestion card system that's part of our strategic plan. Collection Management has begun the process of reconstructing ordering models to assist in the move to centralized ordering. And the business office is in the midst, and we're pretty much at the end of our annual audit. Statistics-wise, we had a good month in January. We actually saw an increase in circulation, up by 7% compared to January of last year. Still down 5% on the 3-year average, but Arbor Hill, Bach, Pine Hills, and Howe saw a jump in circulation, while Delaware and Washington stayed flat. Programming attendance was up by 6%. Door count was up by 5.5%. Room use was up by 12%. And computer use was flat, which is a change from the trend over the past years, but it's looking about the same as the 3-year average. And then, we just wanted to, every month when we report out, we'll share an extra statistic, just to kind of show what the share of different services are across the district at different branches. Washington Avenue is certainly our branch that people come to use the computers. It's 33% of our computer use across the district. I know that the statistics weren't in last month's report, but they're reflected here. Circulation has trended up marginally, but this year was a considerable jump. So we're hoping that these trends all stay in the same direction. And I'm sorry, programming was down 6%, but that trend has been bucked by Arbor Hill and Bach, who have seen an increase in their program participation. Open the floor to any questions. I will report that we still continue to have behavior issues both at Arbor Hill and at this particular location. We continue to meet with the police. Had a meeting with the police chief, and I thought that was there was an interesting conversation there. Since then, response times have improved and presence of the police in the branch has increased. We've seen a little bit of an increase at this particular location, so we're going to reach out. I've already reached out to a common council member just to talk about, again, teen behavior here.
Questions, comments? January was the first full month of Fine Free. So
Yes.
how is that going, the rollout, the response from patrons?
There's been a little bit of pushback about how quickly so books that are in high demand, so 7-day books, 2-day movies, there's been a little bit of a pushback about how we're handling getting those books back quicker. However, we've been open with the public and we've said we're going to make adjustments if we continue to get feedback. The responses to my response have been relatively positive. I think staff have reported that overall. We've had a few reports, particularly at Arbor Hill and Washington Avenue, of people reporting that they're coming back to the library and returning items that had been passed overdue for some time. Overall, it's been fairly positive. I think the rollout went relatively smooth. We had 2 meetings with staff or 3 meetings with staff at different locations to explain the process. The feedback from that was relatively good. There are still some staff and members of the public that we need to convince that this was the right decision, but that's with any major change that we make. So, we'll continue to have a conversation about it. I will tell you I had lunch today with several directors from across the state, including there is a CFO for Queens, and then they have a head librarian, and he's been communicating with us about how Queens can roll this out. But as one director said today, every library that he's spoken to about going fine free, there's been absolutely no regrets. So right now it's early, and I never want to say there's a success, but I can say that there's no regrets right now. And we're going to look closely after probably at the 3rd month mark about returns, because there is a concern on that.
I'm thrilled to hear that the clerk program is so well attended. That's a really exciting change, especially as we try to get civil service to make it easier to apply.
Can I just ask a question about that program? So was civil service involved in that program at all, or was it just all library?
No, it was all library staff. It was all library staff. We had talked about doing some joint programming, but that never came to fruition.
And just want to again say how much I like the stats. The way you present them is really clear and helpful, and you provide the context for them, which makes them more meaningful. And it's exciting to see how things are coming up.
And they are accessible by stats.albanypubliclibrary.org. So if you want to look at the stats, when you don't have the report in front of you, you can go to that website and you can see the same graphs that we've provided here. And it actually breaks it up by branch. So that way we can better report how different branches are performing and how we can change and look at different ways of doing business there to have a better impact on the community going forward. that is part of the strategic plan, so we've at least implemented that part. It is a draft, so there may be changes in the future.
What's going on in Pine Hills? Normally people love programming there.
We're looking at that right now.
What's a draft?
So in other words, I don't wanna say that that product is completely done, so you're gonna look
This-
for changes. No, not these, the stats dot all.
Oh, okay, okay.
So there's some things that we need to change and adjust.
And can you, if you've scheduled the meetings with the community groups,
We're in the process of scheduling and
Okay.
finalizing those meetings.
great, and I think like last year, it'd be helpful if we share them with trustees and trustees sign up, and we'll do that online and at the meeting next month.
I already know Brenda will mail one.
Anything else? Well, you mentioning the fact that you're meeting with directors around the state today reminds me that tomorrow is Library Advocacy Day, so just wanted to make send an email about that earlier, just want to remind everybody that's the day, and if you can make it down, that's great. If not, there's other ways to have your voice heard. All right, so we're done with most of the agenda. There's time for public comment. If anyone from the public would like to provide comment, we're happy to hear it. Okay, and if there's not, then we are having executive session, right?